everyone. I want to welcome you to a new episode of The Laws of Entrepreneurship. Today, I am really excited to bring you Cole Gray, a YouTuber and a branding specialist. He is an expert on all things logos, and I am so excited to have him here today because I know that logos and branding are central to your business building activity, and it's probably the first thing that you think about when you're starting your business. So welcome, Cole.
Thanks for having me on. Really delighted.
Oh, me too.
You talk about logos and I love logos and branding. It's in my blood.
Why do you love them so much?
I'm a visual person and I always have been. And I think logos are the ultimate kind of distillation of someone's message, I suppose, and what they're trying to represent. So it's a good struggle to get that into one image, one icon that can represent that. So I love the challenge of that. Everyone is different. Every single logo is a different challenge. So it's good. I enjoy it.
Well, let's see if you're up for this challenge. I want to present you maybe two scenarios, if that's okay with you, of two different businesses. And I want to see how your approach is either the same or different for these two businesses. So the first one, let's say that I'm a mom and I've decided to start a from home business, maybe selling kids products. So what would be the questions, that you would ask me, or where do we go from here?
Okay, so one of the first questions would be what's the long-term goal of the business? Do you want to just stay as a work from home mom and you don't want to really grow the business too big? It's just either a part-time income or just, a full-time income, but nothing, you don't want to take on staff or anything like that. It's just going to be a sole trader business. Or do you envisage franchising it out? Will it grow to be a larger company? Because there's different things that you need to take into account when you're creating a brand identity, I suppose. But it also, before you even get to the visuals, you need to work out the strategy. And so the strategy for a stay-at-home mom who wants to run a part-time, some extra money business, the strategy for that is going to be entirely different to the strategy for someone who has global expectations. The scope will be different.
Let's say that I envision it being a multi-million-dollar company in the future once my kids are older.
Okay. So we would probably want to find out what your budget is to start with, because we need to work out almost a plan of action. So, it's not just a logo, it's what goes with the logo. What's the whole brand landscape with that? All of your branding materials, marketing, you've got all your copywriting, photography. There's all of these things that people don't think about. They think, I need a logo because I'm starting a business. And it's like, your brand is more than a logo. Your logo is an identifier. So it's when people see it and they recognize it, it makes them think about any interactions that they've had with your brand. It's a bit like seeing someone's face, and you've got that kind of impression that makes you remember who they are. If you're bad with names and you can't remember their name, you'll probably remember how they made you feel the last time you met them. Either they made you laugh, or they made you cry, or they made you angry. Those things stay with you. And so brands are the same. And so we need to look at how you want to grow this multinational business. Will there be sub-brands within this? Is there going to be an umbrella brand and then sub-products below that? What's known as a brand hierarchy, brand architecture. And so it's so hard to kind of do a summary of what I would do for a business like this, because there are so many arms and legs that can grow from it. But I think the first thing that we would do, and I would do this with any business, it doesn't really matter what size it is start with your values, your core values, and then get those down. And we say, okay, are the values going to be your values for the company, or is the company got a different kind of set of values? Because your values may be very personal. They may be, it may be love, family, and I don't know, let's say caring. But for the company, some of those may be relevant, but the company may have a different approach. And so we need to kind of balance up. Well, what do we want to do? Is it going to be you? So for a sole trader, I would say that the values are very much the person who's in that business. I know it is for me. My values are, they don't change whether I'm in this office or whether I'm outside. But when it comes to larger corporate entities, it tends to be different because it's based more around culture and the culture that they're trying to promote with their business. And unfortunately, there's a lot of businesses whose values you would think are just entirely around money. But I think that's changing. I think everything's changing now because just with the younger generations who are coming up, they want to either work with or buy from companies and industries that are actually trying to make the world better. Not just use the resources and make profit. So I think even the big giants are having to slowly lumber their way into a 21st century way of thinking, which is great to see because it's actually making them have to look inward. Because if you just try to, if you just put your core values and your why, your purpose onto your website, that doesn't do anything. That's just, it doesn't do anything. You have to live and breathe them. And I think smaller businesses can do that really well because they're very agile and they can be, I don't like to use the word authentic because authentic is starting to get used as a marketing term. It always happens. All the genuine things start to get taken up by marketing. But when it comes to the larger businesses, it's much slower for them to make changes. And so it takes a long time. But I think we're starting to see some changes for that. And so that's my long-winded way of saying that the strategy element, the values, the vision, your mission, and your purpose are key to how your business will move forward. If you get those wrong at the start, and then you get 2, 3, 4, 5 years in, it becomes really difficult to retrofit things and go, we're in the wrong thing. But if you are genuine about your purpose and your values, that will guide you in all the decisions that you make, whether it be marketing, any sort of spending. Is that, if we do this, does that align with our values? No, it doesn't. Okay, well, we're not doing that then. You have to be really, really strict with it. Sometimes a great opportunity can come along that would make the company money, but it doesn't align with the values. And that can be difficult if you're trying to please shareholders.
So let's say that I've decided then that to start, then I am building my business around being a stay-at-home parent. And so it's easier to basically create content marketing, right, that aligns with my values and my mission statement. And now what? So I've written those things down. I've given them to someone like you, or I've told them to you. How does that affect what kind of colors we're choosing, what it's going to look like, what the font is going to be? I mean, how does it affect that? I think that connection is what's missing maybe for some people who don't understand the importance of how branding connects with the mission and values of a company.
Yeah, I think when it comes to choosing fonts and colors, I think you're right. For some people, it's like, well, it's just a color. I don't really care what color you choose, or my favorite color is red, so I'd like it to be red. One of the first things that I'll say to a client is the logo is not for you. I know you're paying me money, but the logo is not for you. The logo is to attract and hopefully influence a customer to buy from you. And so we need to be thinking about your customer, your target audience. Where do they hang out? What do they read? What's their favorite color? Is there where they hang out? Is there a general feeling, a color palette somewhere? Now, they're not all going to hang around in the same place, but this is where industry research comes in, and I do a lot of that. I'll look at your target market and your industry sector, and I'll look at that and I'll create stylescapes of your competitors, organize them into color bands and say, okay, most of them are in blue. There's a few in green. There's quite a few actually in purple. And then there's one weirdo out here in lime green. One of the decisions that you need to make around color in that respect is, do you want to fit in and be part of the industry, or do you want to be lime green and really stand out and be kind of, the punk element of your industry? You may go, oh no, we definitely don't want to be the lime green punk over here. But depending on how you answer the strategy questions and your target audience, let's say it is rebellious young millennials who want to shake things up, you don't want to go with safe blue. You want to go with the color that they'll feel like, I want to do business with them, because they are totally different to anyone else. If you just go with the colors that you like, there's no reflection, there's no connection with your audience. It's a difficult one because obviously you want to like your identity, and there is a little bit of give and take. But what I find is, I'll ask a client, what's your favorite color? What color do you hate? What shapes don't you like? And I'll say, fine, that's great. Thanks for letting me know that. I can't promise that we won't use any of those because we haven't done the research. And when we get through it, and as we're working through the project, I'll be working very closely with you, and you'll see the results of the studies and the research. And we'll say, okay, look, this is where all these people are hanging out. And you might even be like, wow, I did not know that. I thought a lot of the time I assumed that they would be over here. It's like, well, that's why we're doing the research, because you can't assume just because you are a single mom who likes a specific thing and you want to, it might be you're turning a hobby into a business. That happens a lot. Because you like this thing and you hang out and you read that doesn't mean that your customers are exactly the same as you. So we do all of that work. And by the time we get to the end, and you've told me at the start, you don't like lime green and you don't like triangles. And I say to you, right, here's all the study that we've done. Lime green and triangles are the perfect thing for your audience. And then that's a discussion that we need to have. And it might be that we kind of tone it down a little. We don't go all the way over here. We bring it closer in so that you're a little bit more comfortable with it, but it's still leaning more, it's away from the blue. So you're not part of the crowd, you're on the outside of it. Not every brand identity project will go to those extremes, but they can do that. So color's an easy one for people. I think they can understand that red means danger or blue means cold. Right. But there's lots of positives and negatives for every single color, and you use those in whatever way you need to use them. So for example, if I'm working with accountants and I say, oh, red would be really good. Oh, we can't use red because nobody wants to be in the red. I say, well, red also means passion and energy. And do you not have passion and energy for your clients and their business? Oh, yeah, we do. So you can turn things around. And by going red as an accountant, you're on that, as the previous one, you're on that lime green edge. Accountants are mostly blue. They always want to have blue in one way or another. But if you go red, you're the new kid on the block who's wanting to shake things up. And it's the same with typography. But people don't really, that's more difficult, I think, for people to understand unless it's a really in-your-face, joke-like font. It's all squiggly and jagged, and it's like, oh, that's, we don't want to use that. That's not corporate enough. Fonts can have very subtle differences between them. And you could have an O, for example, which is geometrically very circular, or you can have an O which looks like it's been squashed in at the sides. Depending on the name of the business, certain words might not look right. You might like the font, but it might not look right and sit well and have the right feeling around it, especially when you apply color. When I design logos, I generally design them in black and white, first of all, because we need to focus on the shape and the form. If I show you a logo concept in, let's just use lime green. I don't know why that's in my head tonight, but if I show you like an amazing logo concept in lime green and you don't like lime green, you won't like the concept.
Right.
And no matter if I show you that great concept in another color, you will have fixed in your head that you've seen it in lime green, and it offsets your opinions on it. So by working in black and white, we're focusing on, right, let's look at the shape of this. Then we start to apply color, which adds to the messaging. If it's just an icon we've been working with, we'll then start to bring in different fonts, and that will enhance the messaging. And so by the end of it, I can say to you, so based on all of our studies and all of our research and how we know what they do, their age groups, and all of the hanging out stuff, I won't say to you at the end, do you like this logo? I will ask you, do you feel that this logo fits the goals of your business? And 99.9% of the time, I get a yes. Because we've been through the journey together. What happens, I think, a lot of the time when people buy logos is they say, I'm an accountant, do me a logo. And the designer goes away and goes, accountant, okay, I'll do a calculator, or I'll do an abacus, or and so you get a stereotypical thing, and there's no embodiment to the identity. A lot of the time when I create logos, you can't look at the logo and go, that's an accountant, unless it says accountant. It's deeper than that. It's like the Nike logo is a tick. It's not a shoe. It's not, it's not a tennis racket. It's nothing. It's not sports related. But when you look at it closer, you go, well, it is. It's about performance and ticks and, moving forward that way. And when they first did it, people didn't know what it was. They didn't know it was Nike's logo. That brand equity, that visual awareness is built over time.
Right.
And so when you go to speak to a designer, if you say, designer, I want you to design me a brand, you're not really designing a brand. You're designing an identity that over time will become the brand. Jeff Bezos from Amazon was like, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's a reputation. And so if you start a business, you don't have that reputation from day one. You have to work at it. And so it's my job to take your little work from home mom business and create all of the assets and create the feeling so that when you start to put it out on social media, people start to take notice of it and they start to talk about it and they tell their friends, and, oh, have you used them? Have you bought any of their stuff? Oh, have you left a review? I've seen some reviews. It's quite good. And it also comes down to, how you react to reviews. I see people getting bad reviews and maybe not counting to 10 before they reply, which is understandable. But I think if you're shown to reply to bad reviews in an even-handed way, that can go well in your stead, because it will show that you're trying to work something out. It's when either you see all these reviews unanswered or they're answered in an angry tone. We don't want your business or anything like that. So there's all of these things. These are the things that people remember, and these are the things that will give your brand a reputation, so that when they see your lime green logo, they go, that's that cool little business who are different to the other whatever it is you're selling. I definitely want to buy from them. So that was a really roundabout way of talking about font colors and things like that. But yeah,
so
it's pretty deep.
Well, so by the end of the process, do you find that most of your clients are really emotionally attached to whatever it is that you've designed for them?
I've had more than one client cry when I present concepts, because it's a big thing to, and I feel honored and privileged to be able to take part in that, to create something which is not only probably going to change their lives, but potentially change the lives of others that they employ. There can be a lot of, if you think about it too much, there's a lot of weight on a designer's shoulders to make a thing which is going to be effective enough to carry an entire business. But yeah, people do get emotionally attached, which is why, and not just the owners, but customers. You see what happens when large brands change their logo. People Twitter goes mad. And they're like, oh, what have you done that for? And it's really difficult. To be honest, that happens for about a week and then everyone moves on. So you have to kind of be aware of that. But there have been companies that have made a logo change and the backlash has been so much that they've backpedaled and gone back to the previous one. And large companies have to spend millions. The millions isn't in creating the new logo. The millions is in changing everything that's already got the old logo on it. And I think people mistakenly hear statements like, let's just say Microsoft changed logo, costs $30 million. There isn't a design agency out there who's just been paid $30 million for designing a logo. It's all of the brand assets that have to go after it. It's like redoing the trucks and redoing all the software boxes. There's all of that goes into it. But rebranding a company, in my opinion, is harder than creating a brand for a new company, because there's nothing existing. You're creating it from scratch. If you rebrand a company, you've got all of that existing equity. It can go badly wrong, and that's quite frightening to do that.
Before we get into rebranding, I definitely think you made a really important point, because as a trademark lawyer, of course, people come to me with either their business name, their brand name, a logo or a slogan or a tagline, and it's something that they're very, very emotionally attached to. And so, I would say that a chunk of people, not everyone, not 100%, do know that the most important thing to do in order to protect that asset that they're so emotionally attached to is to, look for a trademark. Because in the US anyway, I mean, I know that you're not here, but I know that you have laws that basically do the equivalent for you there.
Yeah.
That's the most important way to secure and protect it in the long run. It's sort of like insurance for your business name or your logo.
Yeah.
And so I always wonder how many branding agencies or, designers like yourself who help people with this entire concept, are you guys giving, you in your case, do you give some kind of even general instruction or direction at the end of the process, at the end of the journey, that says, if you want to protect it, this is the way to protect it, because it's long-term, it's an investment, but it's insurance for what we've just created for you.
Yeah. I tend to discuss it at the start, because there's no point in me going and designing a brand identity or a logo called something, and then we finish it and then they go and check it and it's already taken, because then we have to start again. And I mean, I'll be honest, I've been doing this for 22 years, but in my first years I didn't look up trademarking or anything like that. I think it's as you grow in experience and you start to understand the depth of how important branding is, that you start to look wider than just what you're producing for the client, and you start to go, okay, well, where's this going to get used? I even ask things like, are you just going to be in the UK, or are you looking to be global? Because if you want to go global, then you'll need to trademark out with, not just in the UK. And you may find that if you look for a UK trademark, you can get it, but if you then go to Europe, it might be taken in Europe. You would know if it was a global one, because then it would probably be trademarked in the UK as well. But I've had instances where, I've seen people who have got the UK one, then they want to do trade in Europe, but it's already trademarked in Germany. And I know every country's, I do not have an in-depth database knowledge of trademarking, but I know enough that when I'm working on concept designs, before I present it to the client, I do an image search check on the WIPO website, because that's really cool, because it can look at the shape. Again, that's why I do it in black. It looks at the shape and it will look for the closest matches, but you can choose whether you want to search by concept or by shape, which is really clever, because it will show things which are pretty close, but they're not quite the same. And here's a question for yourself, because I just want to check that my understanding in its most base terms of trademarking, how it was described to me was that in its basest terms, trademarking is common sense. Does this logo make me think that I'm buying from a different business than I think it is? If you know what I mean. So it might be two fast food chains. One's been around for a while, and then somebody else starts up and does a logo which is very similar. It's not exactly the same, but it's enough that at a quick glance, let's say it was a big yellow W instead of a big yellow M, and you just see the big yellow in the curves and you go, oh, and go in and buy. That's too close. But if the big yellow W was selling motor cars, it's a totally different industry. So my understanding was that if it's a completely different industry and there's no chance of mistaking a product, that's in its basis terms. Is that correct? Ish.
Yeah, ish. Yeah. In the US, yes, it is a likelihood of confusion test. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is one of the most difficult issues to overcome once you do receive it. And so it's better to understand that main issue when you're entering into this whole process. But yeah, that's basically the gist of it, is the reason that two brands with the same name, like Dove, two completely different products, you have Dove soap, Dove body wash, hair care products, and then you have Dove chocolate. And the reason those two are able to coexist is because, nobody's really going to think that Dove chocolate, is, I mean,
you're not going to be washing your hair with it. Yeah.
With chocolate, right. I mean, if Dove Body Care came out with chocolate body wash, then I ask myself, would that cause some kind of...
See, that's the thing, isn't it? It's like initially there is no crossover, but then where does that, because I think there was, I do follow certain things. I think there was I think the most recent Formula One racing logo looked very similar to, I think it was a 3M product. Mm-hmm. And so there was a whole hoo-ha about whether that would go, and now it's F1, so they've just spent millions on doing this up, and you think, well, surely the agency that was designing that will have checked to see if it's close to anything. And so my assumption would be that they would be under the same, I think the bigger agency, the massive agencies like Pentagram who do these big things, I'd imagine they would have IP experts on staff, or at least on retainer, that they can say, could you go check that? And not just some junior designer who says, oh yeah, no, 3M's in an entirely different industry, we'll be fine.
I think that, immediately what comes to mind are two things. One is that the company is such a giant that they don't really care if they're stepping on any toes. They just don't care. I'm big enough to pay off whoever it is that's already using it. If it's going to cost me another $1 million, I don't care, because in the long run, I stand to make, $1 billion. So that's one approach that maybe that they might be thinking about. And the other one is attention. Sometimes the attention that's brought to a company is more than what they could pay for through any type of public relations campaign, or media marketing campaign, advertising. And so just the attention that's brought to a company in that process, you heard about it, right?
Yeah. I suppose in a way, if you could play it that way, and you could deliberately design a logo which is very similar to someone else's, knowing that you are going to get sued for it, but in the background have a logo ready to replace it.
Exactly.
But people are now very aware of who you are, so they'll follow the story. And when you change your logo, I suppose there is something like that. I've got another question for you, actually. It's something which cropped up with me. And that was, I'd created a logo concept for a client. And when I did a WIPO check, a concept came up, and it was pretty much exactly what I'd designed. And that's the problem with when you're creating logos, the more simple the shape, the more chance that it's been done before. You think about the number of logos that are in the world, any that are made up from simple shapes or forms are more than likely going to have been done before. I've actually got a book right behind me, which is about the size of me. It's huge. But these are logos from the sort of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And when you look through here, so for example, the Airbnb logo is in here, but it's like a Japanese steel company from like the 1960s. So nothing is new. Stuff's always been done before. And so my question was this: the concept that was on the WIPO was for a company, and it was no longer trading, basically meaning that it had lapsed. So because I think you have to renew is it 20 years?
In the US, it's every 5th to 6th year you have to renew it, and then on the 10th year.
Right. Okay. So this one had obviously it had not been renewed, so it said it was lapsed. So my question is, would I have been able to forge ahead with the concept I'd created? Now, they weren't even in the same industry, but even let's say they were in the same industry, and I go, oh, I've created this concept. I haven't copied that. This has come out of, I can show the whole strategy and where this has come from. We want to trademark this. It's already been trademarked, but that looks to have, they've not renewed it. So it doesn't look like the company's even around anymore. Would you be able to trademark a logo which had been trademarked before, but is no longer active? That's it. Inactive. That's what it said. Inactive.
Inactive. Well, that's a really, really good question, because here, we refer to them as dead. So,
that's pretty final.
Yeah. So dead or inactive, you're essentially looking at the same type of situation. And if something is dead, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not in use, which is the most important thing. It's the bottom line. It's the question you should be asking yourself instead of focusing on what the status is. Because it's not necessarily the status, it's the foundational question, is this still in use? So if there's a way for you to find that out, either by doing a Google search, by maybe calling the company, then I think that is the safest bet. Because let's say somebody simply forgot to renew it, then it could have lapsed. It could show as dead. Let's say they just didn't have the money to renew it because now they downsized substantially from the large company they used to be. They're still going to be using it and they still have trademark rights in the name.
Yeah, because they've got years behind them of trading off of that identity.
Exactly. And I've seen that happen where they still send cease and desist letters despite not having an active or trademark registration that's alive.
Yeah.
So that's what it comes down to, is don't focus on the wording, just focus on the foundational question, is it still in use? And if you can find an answer to that question or get you closer to an answer, then I think you'd be warmer.
Yeah, I think for me, if I created a concept that was exactly the same or very close to a concept in the same industry, I would go back to the drawing board. I wouldn't want to, because there would be too much confusion from the customer's point of view of, oh, is that them again, but they're doing something slightly different in the same industry. If it was for an entirely different industry, so one was steel making and the other one was cheese making, then I may want to look at pursuing, and I would do the groundwork that you mentioned to see. But I know that there are kind of brands out there that do have very similar logos that, you know, for example, Converse use a star. You've got, there's a beer brand, I think it's Estrella or something, they use a star. There's lots of businesses or brands that use stars, but they're in different industries, and so they kind of get away with it. And the same color as well, so a red star. Yeah, what you said earlier about the confusion thing, you know, is the customer going to be confused between these two? So I have clients who are going through a branding process who've never done that before, and their head's already exploding. And so the last thing I want to do is to bring in terminology about trademarking that confuses them even more. So I'm trying to make sure that I can have the simplest message and say, look, here's what trademarking essentially boils down to. Is this going to confuse a customer, making them think it's someone else's product in the same industry? I think that's fine for me. But yeah, like I say, I generally will look, if it's a name, it's so much easier to check if it's a name. When it's an icon or a symbol, there's a little bit more work. And I do say to the client that, you know, I've done some due diligence, but I cannot guarantee that it doesn't exist in some trademarking book or database somewhere that I've just not had access to. So I can guarantee that the work I'm producing for you is original in concept from what I've created. But if you want to go and trademark it, then I can't guarantee. There's no guarantees because there's so many logos out there. And so I always advise that they go and speak to an IP lawyer, depending on which country they're in, you know, go and speak to their and check their different intellectual property office. I think the States is the USPTO.
USPTO.
USPTO, yeah. And it's the IPO here. But I use the WIPO because it tends to link into quite a few databases. I think it's getting easier these days to do checks like that. I think in the past, before the internet, it must just be going through books.
Yeah.
Trying to see, you know, so I can understand why fees can be potentially quite large if you've got to do an image search. That's a much more difficult one than doing a name search. But yeah, I definitely advise my clients. I think in America, I think there's much more, I think many more businesses go down the trademark route pretty much instantly of landing on a name and getting a logo. It's not really the same over here. It seems mad because it's a really quick way to protect your name, but not many people do. And it's not that expensive. Not if you do it yourself and it's just the name. I think it's £250 here and then £50 for every category.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is, that people don't look to protect people?
I honestly don't know. I don't know if it's just because they're unaware. I'm in a logo designers group on Facebook, Logo Geek, and there's about 6,000 designers in there. And there was a discussion recently about using the TM symbol. And obviously I'd done my video on TM and registered, and not many people know about Service Mark. Not many people know that that's an actual thing as well, because, you know, you didn't product, they're interchangeable, I suppose, but it came about because someone had posted in logos that they'd done over the past year, and every single one of them had the little R symbol next to it. And so I was like, every one of your clients registered their logo. Oh, no, I've just got that. And I said, well, technically, you cannot do that because you have not got a registered trademark on it. You cannot. You said you could put the TM symbol there because you're basically asserting that you own that logo, but you can't put the registered R because you have not gone through the process. You kind of get a lot of, oh, it's just for my portfolio and stuff. It's like, yeah, but that then makes a mockery of people who've gone through the process of registering, you know, and paying for the trademark. It's difficult. And here's another question that's popped into my head, because someone asked me it the other day on my YouTube channel. Their client had just registered, they were in the States, their client had just registered their logo. They were getting some materials made, business cards, brochures. And the person that asked me had said they want to use the R symbol on the logo everywhere. And I think it looks a bit messy. And I was thinking to myself, well, you can have it really, really tiny on the logo. It doesn't have to be big. I mean, it's not like you've not got it the same size of the logo, have you? But the question is, once you've registered the trademark, in order for you to be able to defend that trademark, should you have the R symbol every time your logo is produced?
That's a good question. So you don't have to have it on every single publication, advertisement, product packaging. I mean, you don't have to have it on every single thing. But listen, if I've gone through the hard work
yeah,
and invested that money, you know, and I know that that's what's best for me to insure me against someone ripping it off, then why wouldn't I use it?
Pretty much what I said in my answer. I said they probably just are really excited and want to use it. And so my advice was to just make it small. You know, it should be fairly inobtrusive. And when I'm designing logos, I try to bear that in mind and say, right, if the client registers this as a trademark, where would I place the R symbol? Because I don't think there's a specific rule to where it needs to go. Generally, it will go upper right or lower right. But as you say, it doesn't have to appear there because it may well appear somewhere else in the small print. You know, Coca-Cola is a registered trademark of.
Oh, right.
So it's on somewhere, but it doesn't have to be on the logo. That's something that I didn't know. So I've learned that today. So that's really good. I might actually try and find that comment and go back and say, yes, your client wants it all the time, but technically they don't have to use it. So if you feel very strongly that it's maybe not working or offsetting a design, which I can't see how it would, then you could say, like, we really don't have to use it here. That's good, because I did not know the answer to that one. So thank you for that.
But I don't know. I still stand by the fact that if you've invested that kind of money and you feel like something so minuscule in size, I mean, is going to affect the perception of your brand, I don't know. I feel like you have bigger problems coming.
Yeah, I think one thing I noticed as well was looking at my own brand and registration, which I haven't done yet, so that's really bad. I keep putting it's one of those things. I must do that. I actually looked at registering it in the States because I have a few clients in the US, and actually in 2016. Someone started up a graphic design company called Pixels Inc. in the States. And I was like, man, you know, and I said, well, I wouldn't have been able to do anything anyway because I would only have a UK trademark, so it doesn't really make a difference. But when I looked, I thought, you know, I'm going to just check and see how much it costs to register from the USPTO and see what that is. If I'd have done it, I think it was before August last year, it would have just been the fee to do it. But now, as someone outside the US, I have to hire an American IP lawyer to handle that. So that's instantly going to add on, I don't know, $800,000 on top of. So I'm now just like, I should have done this before.
I think, you know, in the last couple of years, I think the USPTO has become congested with applicants that maybe aren't well-versed in the process.
Yeah.
Things get filed that shouldn't get filed. And so I think that is their way of saying, you know what, we're a little bit frustrated and we're putting a stop to it by making sure that you have someone who knows what the heck they're doing.
Yeah, it's almost a filter, isn't it? It's like, let's filter this so that we're only getting good applications that will probably succeed rather than, because in the UK, there's, like I say, it was £250 and £50 per extra category you want to go in, but you can submit a trademark and pay half, or it's slightly over half. I think it's £150, and they will go through the process up to a point and get back to you and say whether they think it will pass or not. And you have the option then of going, right, well, I won't proceed. So you're only spending $150 instead of $250, but if you want to proceed, it's another $150. So you pay a little bit more, but you get that, you're kind of getting the help of a professional by submitting it, and they do a little bit of looking around and say, yeah, that's fine, do you want to proceed? And then they go, we have some issues that you might want to look at. We don't think this will succeed. Do you have that in the US as well?
Yeah, we have something that's kind of equivalent. So we have what's called an intent to use application. And that basically means, listen, I'm not using my mark yet, but I do plan to use it within the next couple of months. You still have to pay an application fee of $275. So really the USPTO doesn't give you any leeway.
Right.
They say you pay the fee. And in fact, they say if we give you the green light, then you're going to have to pay us an extra $100 when you submit proof to us of how you are using that mark in commerce.
Right. Yeah.
So instead of the discount, it's more like you pay the premium.
You're paying more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'd imagine then more people just go straight to the trademarking rather than intent.
I mean, I think it really depends. I think that clients that I was going to say that, clients who are willing to invest in the 1B route and pay that small extra premium, it's usually companies that are really, really serious about their branding.
Right. Yeah.
And they have good intentions of what they're going to do. For them, paying an extra $100 is actually a really small investment. Because it allows them to gauge whether or not the name is good to go and whether or not they have the green light, and it's coming straight from the horse's mouth. So it's not coming from an attorney who says, well, maybe, we have a good chance. Because like I said, it's a chance until the horse says go.
Yeah.
So when the USPTO gives you that green light, it's kind of like, okay, for sure. That's my for sure that I'm good to go. And to pay $100 extra for that, I can now go and invest in my branding, my advertising materials, my packaging. Whereas if I had done it the other way around, investing in my packaging and branding and filed that application and they said no, then I'm out a lot more than just $100.
Definitely. I mean, it's not even $100 it's not a lot for a big company, but really in the scheme of things, it's not a lot to pay for that confidence that everything's okay. I've had a client in the past who has gone ahead. I didn't do the branding, but they came to me afterwards for other stuff. They went ahead based purely on the fact that they were able to buy the website domain name. They thought because the domain name was available that no one was trading under that company name, and boy, were they wrong.
I think that is such an important point that you brought up, and in none of my interviews, has that been brought up, and I love that you brought it up. It's so, so, so important. Just because the domain is available, it doesn't mean that the trademark is available, which is a really big deal because in the big picture, the trademark will take precedence.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So your name or your brand name, if it's registered, allows you a leverage to be able to take someone's domain from them. And it's not that your domain has leverage. It's the trademark that has leverage. So be careful and make sure you know what the hierarchy is.
Yeah, I think people just think website. If I've got the website, then I'm good. I'm safe. It'll be fine. And it's not, because I think, especially when I work with clients and, if the client has a company name and they try to get the domain, the domain name's gone. It's like, do you need the domain name to be your company name? Not necessarily. There's a good example of I think it's an American company. It's the the Peanut Butter Company Limited. So they had that domain name, but it was quite long-winded and people couldn't remember if it needed limited on the end or not. So they bought ilovepeanutbutter.com. That's much easier to remember. I try to push my clients down that route as well and say, get a memorable name, because one of my frustrations right now is this trend of, because you can't get a word, remove a letter. Like, so if it's flutter, remove the E, so it's still flutter.
Oh yeah.
But people don't search that way or type that. People don't go, oh, I can't find it. Oh, I know what I'll do. They must have removed the E. You don't think that way. A good example of that is, I've got, my business name's Pixels Inc. It's not the longest name in the world, but I do use a K for the ink part. So it's a play on Pixels Incorporated. Because when I came up with the company name, Monsters Inc. was out at the cinema at that time. And I was like, oh, Pixels Inc. Because I deal with pixels. And it was INC. And then, I could be really clever and have pixels and ink. That would be good. So I got that, but I've also got the domain names with a C, just in case people spell it wrong. But I've more recently bought rockyourbrand.co.uk because of, all of this stuff, because I'm generally pushing branding off the back of that. Rockyourbrand.com's already taken. I think that's a promotional merchandise company. So they're talking about rocking your brand through print, where I'm talking about rocking your brand through strategy and design. So there's a difference there, but we'll see if they come a knocking for that. But I was really surprised that rockyourbrand.co.uk, which is the .co.uk is the big one for us in the UK, was available. I was blown away that was there. But that's a good example of, if I didn't know any better, I'd be like, oh, rockyourbrand.co.uk is available. I'm going to go trademark that. To be honest, I've looked at the trademark and I don't think there's a UK one. There's one in Germany that's been trademarked. They're a brand design company, so it depends on how far I'd want to take it. But I just wanted to bring that up, and thankfully you said that it's a good thing to bring up because no one has. But I do think people put an awful lot of weight into website domain names and social media handles. I think they are way more powerful than they actually are. And as you said, all it takes is the person to come along who has the registered trademark and say, well, you're never going to be able to use those, so you might as well give them to us. And you couldn't even try and sell it for a lot of money, because they could probably go to court and say, well, they are just trying to get a lot of money, or squat on a domain name and try to get as much money for it. And I don't know if courts would rule in favor of a trademark holder and say to the owner of the domain name, you can't possibly get them to pay that because you're just, I suppose extortion may be a word. But yeah, I want to bring that up because I've had someone come to me where they've had to start again because a trademark holder said, no, we have that. And they'd spent a lot of money up to that point on all their branding. So quite scary.
Well, listen, I want to end this podcast on a high note, which is everything you just mentioned right now, because I think that those were at least just two very central issues to this trademark process that aren't necessarily highlighted, most especially by guests. And so I want to thank you for having as much knowledge as you do about the trademark process, because I think it shows that you're invested in your clients, and that you do your research, and that you are an expert in your field, and that you're doing your best to educate yourself so that you can pass on that knowledge to the people that are looking to you for guidance, really, because they don't have the time or they don't have the knowledge, and that's why they come to people like you and to me, but usually more so to you because they're interested in how pretty their logo and their branding is going to look.
Yeah. And then I come to you
right
on their behalf. Yeah, definitely. I think you're right. I think everyone wants they want the pretty picture and the kind of the exciting creative element. And I do think I let them down a little bit at the start when I say, okay, before we get to that, let's do a lot of really heavy lifting and talk about research and strategy. And they're like, oh, I thought I was going to get a logo. Well, you will, but let's get this done first because it's important. And everything, when it all comes together as a whole, when you've done all of that, it's a much more effective brand. When you get it all trademarked, you just feel safe and comfortable because you know that it's all protected and the money you've spent isn't going to be a waste. To anyone who's watching this, who's thinking or is going through that process, and thinking, can't really afford to trademark, I really do think you should look at what else you're looking to spend something on and divert that money to trademarking, and then, look at that other thing later, because you could lose everything.
You could lose everything. And then you could be crying for a different reason, not because not because you're happy, but now because you're going to have to unattach yourself from your business baby.
Yeah. And we're going to should have listened to what they said on that YouTube video, but I didn't.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Cole. I really appreciate you being
Thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
This was a great little exchange, and I'm sure that people will take all your tidbits and all my tidbits and, move forward in the right direction.
That's what it's about, isn't it? It's just about helping people do the right thing and not make mistakes that, can easily be prevented.
Right. All right. Well, have yourself a good day, and make sure to subscribe to Cole's channel, which we will link down below.
Awesome.